Chapter 20. I ran up the stairs 2 at a time, holding the book from the library, the one with the essay contest printed out in it. I couldn't wait to tell my parents. Before I could open my mouth, my mother looked at my book and frowned. "Another new book?" she said. "You should be spending more time doing math, something you can actually get good at." Then she became all nostalgic. "You know, when I was your age, I used to eavesdrop on my brother's math lessons." Yeah. I didn't have time for this." "I'm not you, Mum," I exclaimed. The words came shooting out of my mouth, and my mum flinched. "I'm sorry. I just mean, maybe I'd like something else." "Like what?" she said. She put her broom down and crossed her arms. I bit my lip. "Like writing?" "English writing?" she asked. Like it was the most preposterous thing in the whole world. Like I just said basket weaving. I nodded. "You heard Mr. Yao. You gotta be native at English. And I'm sorry, but we're just not." "Mr. Yao? Since when was he an expert on anything other than meanness?" "You can, however, be native at math." "I don't want to be native at math." My mom frowned. "You're not getting it, are you?" she said. She sat down on the bed and looked me in the eye. "You just can't be as good as the white kids in their language, honey. It's their language." My gaze sank to the floor. As I dragged myself out of the room, my mother called after me. "Someday you'll thank me." She's wrong, I told myself. She was wrong to put the power of infinity. I thought about picking up the phone to call Lupe, but instead I flipped on the TV. A rerun of The Simpsons was playing. I stared at Marge Simpson with her big hair and easygoing smile. Marge, to me, was like the perfect American mom, so warm and forgiving that even if Bart was setting the house on fire, she'd continue chatting with her sisters on the phone. "Maybe he just needs more love," she'd say. Sometimes I wondered what it'd be like to have an American mom, just for a day. I could eat all the chocolate chip cookies I wanted because American moms on TV were always baking them, or making casseroles, or organizing birthday parties with themes. I'll tell you what they were not doing. They weren't pestering their kids to do more math. Whatever. I'd show her. She didn't even have to know about the essay contest. One day, it'd just be like, "Hey, can you pass the chopsticks? Oh, and by the way, I want a motel." Mr. Yao's car roared into the motel and interrupted my daydreaming. I flipped off the TV as he and Jason walked up to the front office. "It's important, son, that you understand every part of the family business," Mr. Yao said to Jason as they stepped in. "But I don't understand why we have to do this now," Jason protested. "Do what now?" I asked. Mr. Yao lifted up the front desk divider so that he and Jason could join me behind the desk. "Today, Jason's going to do your job," Mr. Yao announced. "He's going to check in customers." You've got to be kidding me. Jason was not a natural checker-inner. For one, he didn't have good customer service skills, like me. No surprise there. But he also had basic problems figuring out the math. "So it's $20 a night plus tax," he told a customer while his father watched and I stood behind them. The customer gave him an $100 bill and wanted change. Jason struggled to calculate the tax, which in Anaheim, California was 13%. Do you have a calculator?" he asked me. "It's $22.60, I told him. I'd checked so many people in by now, $22.60 was tattooed in my head. "Don't forget, I need 2 rooms, the customer reminded him. "Right," Jason said. He pulled out his hand and tried to do the math in the air with his fingers. "So that's 2 times $22.60, Mr. Yao yelled. "You can't figure out what that is?" "Hang on, just give me a second," Jason said. He bit his lip. "You got to carry the 1 and then add the..." Mr. Yao shook his head and stomped into the manager's quarters. After Jason finally figured out the math and gave the customer his keys, we went to find his father. He was in the kitchen. "I did it! I checked in my first customer," Jason told his dad proudly. His father didn't say anything. "Well, how'd I do?" Jason asked. Mr. Yao breathed in and out, looking like he was trying to contain a wildfire, and was failing. "How'd you do? You were awful. A disgrace. All that using your fingers to do math? What are you, 5? Jason's face turned beet red. "Your math isn't even as good as the girls." Mr. Yao spat the words at him as he eyed Jason up and down. "God, you embarrass me." It was his first time, I said in Jason's defense. Yeah, well, he screwed up, Mr. Yao growled. He stared at Jason long and hard to make sure his words sank in. I looked down. I could see the whites of Jason's knuckles. Afterward, when Mr. Yao went out to talk to my parents, I walked over to Jason. He was sitting all by himself in a corner in the front office. I knew exactly what he was feeling, because I had felt it just a couple of hours ago when my mom yelled at me. It's okay, I said softly. Jason shook his head. Don't, he said. I put my hand on his shoulder anyway. He jerked his body away. Just don't.